Genshin Impact is a wondrous game with an ever-growing world, and stylish art design is able to capture the imagination of players. Whether you enjoy the world, story or gameplay, one aspect that keeps players coming back are the amazing characters. So I'm Darcblade with a character guide to Faruzan in Genshin Impact. In this guide we will briefly cover the basic lore of the character, their moves, abilities, weapon options, stat priorities and artifact builds. Remember though that these guides are aimed at free to play and low spender players, so the guides will feature the characters as if they were mainly Constellation level 0 with 4-star weaponry, however there may be 1 or 2 exceptions. Faruzan is a 4-star character who has an anemo vision and wields a bow, but in order to obtain her you have to wish for her either on limited time banners or eventually the standard banner. Faruzan is a Heravatat scholar who is well over 100 years old, as thus she self-identifies as everyone else's senior, but with her age she has significant knowledge of ancient scripts and machinery of all different kinds. In her early years, as a member of the Heravatat Darshan, she disappeared at some point in the past after being exposed to remnants of the Scarlet King's power, causing her to relive Sumeru's past. But now in the present she still continues her research despite it being niche according to the academia. Nonetheless, she is knowledgeable despite her youthful appearance and is often described as a kindly but chatty parent. Now every character in Genshin Impact has various talents. These are divided into combat talents and passive talents. Combat talents are moves and abilities that you use during combat, and passive talents are mechanics that work in the background of a character. When it comes to Faruzan, her first combat talent is normal attacks, Parthian Shot. By pressing the attack button, you can perform up to a 4-hit combo with her bow. This will deal physical damage. Holding down the aim button and then releasing an arrow, or alternatively holding down the attack button for a short period, will perform a charged attack, firing an arrow in the direction you are aiming. You can also hold down the aim shot, to which after a small amount of time, anemo winds will accumulate on the arrowhead, causing your charged attack to deal anemo damage. She also has access to a plunging attack, which is done by pressing the attack button whilst in mid-air, which will cause Faruzan to plummet towards the ground with falling arrows around her, damaging foes in an AoE. Her next combat talent is her elemental skill known as Wind Realm of Ascension. When activated, Faruzan will damage foes in an AoE around her as she deploys a mechanical polyhedron device. The damage dealt is classed as anemo damage, but this has a few other effects. When the device is active, you'll see a floating triangle to the left of Faruzan. This can potentially be more depending on constellations you have available to you. Having this device next to you is also known as being in the Manifest Gale state. Whilst in the Manifest Gale state, Faruzan's next fully charged aim shot will consume this state, and your charged shot arrow will become known as a hurricane arrow. This will deal anemo damage based on the damage of a fully charged aim shot, and on top of that it will also create the pressurized collapse when it hits a target or surface. When the pressurized collapse is activated, a vortex is created at the point of impact, dealing AoE anemo damage and pulling all nearby opponents and objects into the vortex. This vortex damage is considered elemental skill damage. Anyway, her next combat talent is the Wind's Secret Way, which is her elemental burst. When activated, Faruzan deploys a dazzling polyhedron device that will unleash a whirlwind pulse that deals AoE anemo damage to opponents. While the dazzling polyhedron persists, it will continuously move along a triangular path. Once it reaches each corner of that path, it will unleash one more whirlwind pulse, again dealing AoE anemo damage. On top of dealing damage, the whirlwind pulse aspect of her elemental burst also has debuffs and buffs associated with it. First of all is the Perfidious Wind's Bell, to which nearby opponents affected by the whirlwind pulse will have their anemo resistance decreased, and there is a buff known as Prayerful Wind's Benefit, to which all nearby party members, the whirlwind pulse is unleashed, will gain bonus anemo damage, making this buff incredibly powerful when used with other anemo characters. But let's move on to the passive talents. First of all is Impetuous Flow. When Faruzan is in the Manifest Gale state, created by her elemental skill, the amount of time taken to charge a charged shot is decreased by 60%. And she can also apply the Wind Secret Way, Perfidious Wind's Bell, which is the debuff created by her elemental burst, to opponents who are hit by the vortex aspect of your elemental skill's charged shot. Her next passive talent is Lost Wisdom of the Seven Caverns. When characters who are affected by the Wind Secret Way's Prayerful Wind's Gift deal anemo damage using their normal charge, plunging attacks, elemental skills or elemental bursts, they will gain the Hurricane Guard effect. This damage will be increased based on 32% of Faruzan's base attack. One instance of Hurricane Guard can occur once every 0.8 seconds, and this damage will be cleared after Prayerful Wind's benefit expires or the effect is triggered once. So this allows characters to deal huge instances of animo damage based on the base attack of Faruzan. So keep this in mind when choosing what weapon you want to use for her, as your base attack is based on your weapon, not your actual attack percentage. And then finally is Tomes Light the Path. When Faruzan is dispatched on a Sumeru expedition for 20 hours, she'll gain 25% more rewards, which makes her useful when you're away from the game for long periods of time. So those are all the combat and passive talents available to Faruzan. Let's quickly move over to talk about the constellations. Now remember, these guides are aimed at constellation level 0 characters. However, there are a few that stand out if you're lucky enough to get more constellations for Faruzan. First of all is constellation level 1, Truth by Any Means, which gives Faruzan the ability to fire 2 hurricane arrows instead of just 1 whilst under the effect of the manifest gale state. You can see this next to my character here, as she has 2 triangles to the left of her instead of 1. And the other standout constellation is constellation level 6, the Wondrous Path of Truths. Characters affected by the Wind's secret ways, her elemental burst, Prayerful Wind's benefit, have 40% increased critical damage when they deal animo damage. When the active character deals damage while affected by the Prayerful Wind's benefit, they will apply pressurized collapse to the opponent's damage, and this effect can be triggered once every 3 seconds. A nice buff and crowd control effect to any character dealing animo damage. So those are all the constellations. Let's move on to the next part of the video where we talk about the builds that I like to use for Faruzan. Now Faruzan at her core is definitely a support character that is designed to benefit and enhance other animo characters. While she can be used in various non-traditional ways, you can potentially even use her as a main DPS if you really wanted to. The way I use her is as a support for animo main DPS characters such as Zhao or Wanderer. So the first build I use for her is the Noblesse support build. This build is all about supporting a main DPS animo character, enhancing their damage not only through the various skills and talents we have, but also through our artifact sets. So when it comes to the weaponry, of course 5-star weaponry is going to be optimal, but failing that, I would go for any bow that has energy recharge attached to it. The Favonius War Bow is a good option, as well as the Sacrificial Bow. Both of these give energy recharge. The Favonius War Bow also allows critical hits to restore energy particles, and the Sacrificial Bow, after damaging an opponent with an elemental skill, gives us a chance of our elemental skill cooldown being reset. Failing that, if you were lucky enough to get the Fade in Twilight when the event was active, that is also a good option. That gives us more energy recharge, as well as the Radiance of the Deeps bonus, which will ultimately increase Faruzan's attack. And failing that, you can also consider going for the Stringless, which gives us elemental mastery and increases our elemental skill and burst damage by a certain percentage. This is definitely a good option if you have a lot of energy recharge on your artifacts. And speaking of artifacts, you want to go for 4 pieces of the Noblesse Oblige set. For wearing 2 pieces of this artifact set, your elemental burst damage will be increased by 20%, but more importantly, for wearing 4 pieces of the artifact set, after using an elemental burst, all party members' attack will be increased by 20% for 12 seconds. And with this build, as we are prioritizing the Wind's secret way, Faruzan's elemental burst, it means that not only will we be providing an increase to our allies' animo damage, a decrease to opponents' animo resistance, but thanks to Noblesse Oblige, we'll also be providing an attack bonus to our team as well. As for the stats on your artifacts, for your sands I'd recommend going for either energy recharge or attack percentage. For your goblet I recommend animo damage, and then for your circlet I'd go for crit rate or crit damage, especially crit rate if you're using the Favonius War Bow. As for the substats, go for energy recharge, crit rate and crit damage. Now when it comes to the talents for this build, I first recommend going for your elemental burst first, followed by your elemental skill, and then your normal attacks, where you'll have a great support build that will enhance and elevate the damage capability of your animo main DPS. But there is another build that I like to use, known as the support Viridescence build. This build is similar to the first build featured, but also enhances Faruzan's actual DPS as well. So whilst it's also good at increasing the damage capability of our main animo DPS, it is also strong in increasing the damage of our elemental reactions. so it benefits from having Cryo, Pyro, Electro or Hydro characters in the team as well. So for the weapons, much like the first build, I'd recommend going for energy recharge weapons, so Sacrificial Warbow, Favonius Warbow, played in Twilight are all good choices, and failing that I'd also recommend the Stringless. As for your artifact set, you'll want to go for 4 pieces of the Viridescent Venrir set. For wearing 2 pieces of this artifact set, you'll gain an Anemo damage bonus, and for wearing 4 pieces, it increases your swirl damage by 60% and decreases the opponent's elemental resistance to the element infused in the swirl by 40% for 10 seconds as well. So, like I said, it greatly increases the damage of our elemental reactions. As for the stats for your sands, you want to go for energy recharge or attack percentage. For your goblet, go for Anemo damage bonus, and then for your circlet, go for crit rate or crit damage. As for the substats, energy recharge and crit damage is what I would advise. As for the talents, much like the first build, you'll want to go for your elemental burst first, followed by your elemental skill, and then your normal attacks. This way you'll have another great support build that not only increases the main DPS Anemo character's damage through our elemental burst and skill, but it will also increase the damage of our elemental reactions provided by our other team members, especially if they have skills or bursts that persist on the field whilst they are not the active character. This is also a build you may want to consider if someone else on the team also has the Noblesse Oblige set. Now of course there are other ways to use Faruzan if you really want to. You can either use her as a main DPS if you so wish. Doing so, I'd recommend certain artifact sets such as the Wanderer's Troop set with more DPS focused bows that have crit rate and crit damage on them. But for the most part I like to use her as more of a support character. But every character out there in Genshin Impact has various pros and cons. No character is absolutely perfect. When it comes to Faruzan, her biggest pro is her support capabilities, especially when used in unison with Anemo characters. Being able to debuff opponents, reducing their Anemo resistance whilst increasing the Anemo damage of her allies definitely makes her useful in propping up other Anemo characters out there. On top of that, she also has crowd control capabilities. Thanks to her elemental skill creating a vortex, she can group up opponents quite easily and quite often. And then finally for the pros is that she is an Anemo character, meaning that she can create strong elemental reactions when coupled with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo and Electro characters. But of course there are cons. Two of Faruzan's major cons are firstly, her elemental burst has a high energy cost. This is why we have invested so much into energy recharge. You can alleviate this as well slightly if you are able to get Constellation level 4, but for the most part this is a con you need to be aware of. And the other con is, unfortunately, she's a little bit limited when it comes to her buffs as they mainly assist Anemo characters more than anyone else. But regardless, if you do have a strong Anemo character, an Anemo main DPS character in your team, then Faruzan is a great choice to accompany them. And speaking of teams, every character in Genshin Impact is made stronger when used in the right team composition. When it comes to Faruzan, as we've mentioned many times, she works best when used alongside other Anemo characters. Zhao, Wanderer, Kazuha, Heizu, and more. They all benefit from having Faruzan in their team. On top of that, she works well with characters who have off-field bursts and skills that specialise in Cryo, Electro, Pyro, and Hydro. So keep that in mind when constructing a team around Faruzan. But overall, Faruzan is an interesting character. She definitely seems to be designed as a character to prop up other Anemo characters in the game. Most of the time when it comes to combat, you want to start off by unleashing your elemental skill, grouping up opponents, activating other characters' off-field abilities, going back to Faruzan, unleashing her elemental burst to provide all those buffs, and then switching to whoever your main Anemo DPS character is. But of course you can use her in other ways if you wanted to. This for me is how I preferably like to use Faruzan. So there we have it, that is my character guide and overview to Faruzan in Genshin Impact. Now remember that there are multiple ways to play and use characters in the game, which is one of the many aspects that makes Genshin Impact so enjoyable. So at the end of the day, use the characters how you want to use them. These builds are just how I personally like to use the characters, and I hope they help you out in your adventures. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a character guide to Faruzan in Genshin Impact. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.